Welcome back to the Athens
can
Democracy
peacefully
Forum.
coexist when citizens learn to question accordingly. I believe that governments can achieve this through campaigns that inform the public of the characteristics and potential misuses of AI-driven deepfake technology. Working alongside schools, the government could help implement classes that teach young people how to source check information. Similar to medical vaccines, I believe that small doses of altered content can help citizens develop antibodies against fake news. In collaboration with social media companies, the government could offer users monetary rewards for taking daily fake news quizzes. Utilizing influencers, the government could raise awareness through story times, and in doing so reach larger and more diverse audiences than commercials could have reached alone. These are just a few ways in which governments around the world can minimize the effects of misinformation.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. A good afternoon to you from the Athens Democracy Forum. My name is Farah Nayeri. I'm a culture correspondent of the New York Times. The title of this next panel could easily be, "Don't Believe Everything That You See." It's all about deepfakes. And in case you wondered what a deepfake is a video where you see people do things and say things that they never actually did in real life. It's a doctored video. It's a faked video. And, you know, there are all kinds of implications with this kind of technology becoming more and more mainstream. I think deepfakes first came to the public's attention, the general public's attention, in 2017 when there were a huge number of videos of celebrities and actors engaging in pornographic acts, which they actually never did in real life, going viral. And so this whole conversation, this whole debate started getting inflamed at right around that time. And nowadays, from what I understand, just about anybody can create a deep fake. My friend Kristen Davis, who curated this panel, was telling me last night over dinner that there is a mother in America who deep faked a video to show that her daughter was on the cheerleading team because she really wanted her daughter to be on the cheerleading team, and the daughter wasn't. So really, it's at everyone's kind of disposal, this technology. And to my mind, there are sinister implications for democracy. And this is something absolutely dangerous going forward. But, you know, I'd like to hear more from my panelists. So to introduce my first panelist, Barnaby Francis, who is sitting to my right, I thought I would tell a little, very brief story that connects to an artwork he made. In 2019, as you all may have known, there was a deepfake video that appeared that went viral of Nancy Pelosi speaking for the Speaker of the House of Representatives, speaking in a very kind of slurred tone. It's looked at as if Nancy was inebriated, that Nancy Pelosi had had too much to drink. And of course, that was a fake video. It was a deep fake. And I believe that Donald Trump tweeted that video. And, you know, what happened to that video was an adventure in itself, which Barnaby was telling us about. The video was not taken off social media platforms, and Barnaby decided he's going to make an artwork consisting of deep-faked videos of people like Donald Trump, Morgan Freeman, but also Mark Zuckerberg, saying ominous things in this video that he actually didn't say in real life. And the reaction to that was pretty major because that went seriously viral as well. And I think that the European Union actually started thinking seriously about banning facial reconstruction technology. So Barnaby, let me turn to you. I know that your artist name is Bill Posters. Right. People can go and watch this video online. But I wanted to get you to talk a little bit about this video and the whole concept of deep fakes, because you, for you, it's a way of making art. It's an art form, and I understand that art is about artifice, and art is about representing people who, you know, in a kind of make-believe way. But do you understand the democratic implications or the political implications of the art that you make?
It's a great question, absolutely. So just for a bit of context for fellow panelists and viewers here and online, my artwork is essentially about interrogating forms of power online, and I use emerging technologies to kind of critically ask questions around surveillance capitalism and issues that we all care about, like truth, trust, and democracy and privacy online. So I created a series of artworks called Big Data Public Faces with a collaborator, Daniel Howe. And as you mentioned, we inserted these into Instagram as a provocation, if you like, in the aftermath of the Congresswoman Pelosi scandal, to kind of ask a question whether, would it be one rule for Congresswoman Pelosi or another rule for Mark Zuckerberg in that instance, because it seemed like Facebook were making arbitrary decisions about synthetic media on their platforms at this time because there were no policy standards that were in place at that moment. And yes, the artworks were picked up and went viral and created this furore around the issues that kind of our artwork's connected with, right? Which is about kind of like disinformation and misinformation and the way that truth is distributed online, or how our perceptions can be altered by various forms of technologies that are using new media like this. Mm-hmm. So we kind of really wanted to kind of critically interrogate those questions that exist, and we use the deepfake as a form of that. When
we were having conversation beforehand, you were saying deepfakes make thought-provoking art, and that you didn't really, you weren't so bothered about deepfakes as you were with the fundamental issue of we have these smartphones that are much more dangerous because they in themselves are eroding people's freedoms, privacy, and all of that. And can I get you to develop that thought?
Yeah, so I was interested in the form of synthetic media as an art form because it creates an incredibly emotional experience for the viewer. You have a power in the moving image there that allows people to kind of really engage with that content in quite an accessible and relational way. Yeah. So for me as an artist, as a form of communication, as a way to engage broad international audiences, it's a very interesting form to do that because it allows people to engage with issues that they might not engage with, but through a form that is very provocative and is very emotionally impacting.
I agree, but then you can get someone who watches a snippet of your Mark Zuckerberg video in which he's saying some very ominous things and really believe that Mark said that and run with it and run it on other social media platforms. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course, it's possible.
That you're making art, and art is in the artistic context is fine, but then when taken out of the artistic context, there are all kinds of dangers which we'll be discussing with our other panelists.
Absolutely, and that is true for any form of information that's shared in any forum or information ecosystem online, right? Whether that's misquoted, whether that's misrepresented, etc. So the real kind of key component here is literacy and context. So anything that I share online is contextualized as pieces of contemporary art. They're conceptual art pieces, so there's always that kind of like transparency in relation to the media that's being shared, right? And unfortunately, we don't get that in many other forms or contexts of information that's shared online as well.
Right. Toomas Hendrik Ilves, you're the former president of Estonia. Welcome, Mr. President. And Forbes magazine said that after, while you were running things, Estonia was the most digitally savvy country on earth. You led a digital revolution in your country, and my understanding is that nowadays it's possible in Estonia to be identified through facial recognition technology, or not really? No. How digital is Estonia?
It's more, basically, I think it's overdone. Estonia, all public services or all interactions between the citizen and the state can be done digitally, except for getting married, getting divorced. You have to show up for those two, and also for selling or buying physical property, which is not a bad idea, given that 2 Russian mafiosi bought apartments in Trump Tower in the US through anonymous shell companies, and we don't allow anonymous shell companies to buy. Everything else you can do online. Last year, in January, I read an article in your newspaper about basically there was a backlog of 3.5 million passport applications after 2 months of COVID. I said, why a backlog? Well, it's because the offices were closed. Whereas when I go to Estonia, I had to renew my passport. I just sort of go online. I had to upload a new picture because, less hair and more gray. But other than that, it was the same. And everything else has stayed the same. Still born on the same day, all that. I didn't have to fill anything out. You can do all that. That's what we do. But in terms of facial recognition, no, not much. But on deepfakes, I'm much more worried.
You're much more worried. I mean,
Because-
if your country is working with facial recognition technology, let's say, somebody pretends they're me, and they go off and make a video of me doing something criminal. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
I think it's worse than that. I think basically the rise of deepfakes, unlike photography, photoshopping, and other things, which because of the movement involved and because of you can do it with voice and video, is that it really strikes at the empiricist bases of democracy, which basically the 18th century. I mean, science in the 17th century plus empiricism, which grew out of that with George Berkeley and Locke and Hume, really underlies our understanding of liberal democracy. I mean, that's
because evidence. It's
Right.
Science is rooted in evidence.
Right.
And evidence is often visual,
It is
and this
almost
evidence can be fake.
Right, and that's precisely the point, that you no longer can believe your senses. And the way that the 18th century philosophers, out of which grew also the United States, was to believe in what you can see and measure instead of the demagoguery of despotic regimes, as, for example, in France until the French Revolution, because the king is the king because God has made him king, and all this divine right of king stuff, which, we see again with Donald Trump. I mean, but the point is that once you get out of that, you lose the understanding that what you see is real. You can no longer believe anything. And this is my fear, is that the basis of liberal democracy has been empiricism, that you believe evidence.
But so, why? I mean, we're about to go to Ashley, but I just wondered why you think that's a threat to democracy.
Because you can undermine or basically anything. You make a it's not porno. It's not even drunk Nancy Pelosi. It is a fake video of a politician taking a bribe. Which I think offends people a lot more than, sort of catching Corey Lewandowski doing something. That you can completely discredit people who have been legitimately elected by creating deep fakes.
Right.
And the problem is the technological solutions to fighting that are fairly limited. You can, in fact, do, as one person I know, do massive data searches to find that, this scene actually has been used elsewhere or something like that. But they're fairly trivial and ineffective. So we're going to have to actually school people to not believe what they see.
Yeah, and so not believe what they see and not believe what they hear, because you can fake audio, and probably not believe what they smell. As you said, the senses, are out the window. So I'm not quite sure how you can convince people of anything.
That's why I'm worried.
All right.
That's why I'm really worried.
Ashley, it's really nice to have you here with us.
Yeah.
Let me give everyone Ashley's title. Ashley is a senior security engineer at Netflix, but she's here with us today in a personal capacity and not speaking on Netflix's behalf. So Ashley, let's get us, to hear you riff about some of the themes that the president was just making.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So I actually share the belief that it's worrisome.
We can't hear you enough.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
Speak louder.
That's better?
Yeah, speak louder.
So I share the belief that deepfakes are worrisome. Is that better sound? Although I do stand in the middle of this line that deepfakes are artful, right? So synthesized media, it is a form of art, and it's been around since the 19th century. Like fake visuals are a part of creative freedom and creative expression. But, you all kind of got into this earlier, when you step outside the bounds of that art, then become like there are real impact, catastrophic risk to deepfakes. A well-timed deepfake can have real impact on an election, on someone's reputation. So you're essentially borrowing influence for a momentary motive. And then once that seed is planted, it's almost irreversible to basically go back and revert this like spread of instant knowledge. So for me, it's the virality. It's the fact that this line of disinformation and deep fakes, the virality of information is just too powerful.
And you were saying to me earlier, I mean, you were describing it as a catastrophe.
Absolutely.
Why is it a catastrophe?
Well, I think that's it's not an absolute.
It's not an absolute catastrophe,
not an absolute.
but it's a relative catastrophe.
Absolutely. It
Right.
can be, though. Like, if you think about, I think one of the examples I heard, right, is like if a tech CEO, if a deepfake came out, a tech CEO announced half of the staff was being laid off, the stock falls immediately,
Right.
and everyone loses belief in the stock market, right? That is a immediate impact of a deepfake, and no one can reverse that. So I do share the belief that they're worrisome. I don't think there's great technology right now to detect them. I know Microsoft and some other companies are working on it, but I don't think we're quite far along where most people can spot the difference between what is fake and what is real when it comes to visual and audio. And it's because like visual and audio, like our sensories, like our senses, like you said, they are our native belief system, right? We want to believe whatever we see. You all see us on stage and we're real. And if we step into a world where that's not true, that is basically the end of democracy as we know it. So
Yeah, that's pretty serious stuff. As I said, you know, this is really quite sinister. I mean, the consequences could be quite sinister.
yeah.
It could indeed, you know. But
Yeah.
I totally agree and share the sentiments of my fellow panelists. You know, this is part of the reason why, as an artist researcher, I began to investigate these emerging technologies and some of the potential impacts, and then apply that into an artistic context, right? Yes, it was conceptual art and it was a piece of internet art, but it was really a media literacy piece as well, right? To kind of like raise the alarm about these technologies and do that in a way that is quite neutral and transparent, right? But if we zoom out a little bit and we kind of like look historically around like what could be kind of framed as Gutenberg technologies, right? Like the synthetic media could be classed as a Gutenberg technology because it's a phenomenon that's existed, you know, only for the last few years. It's been the preserve of like high-end Hollywood VFX studios for the last few decades, but now it's becoming more democratized and accessible, right? Hence the ramp in the worry and the fear. But actually, we can look at the photograph the same way we could look at synthetic media today, right?
Absolutely.
The photograph,
Absolutely.
in the emergence of the camera, the photograph was heralded as a huge, huge concern around trust in images, right?
Yeah.
Laws and legal experts and scholars debated whether photographs could be used in a court of law because were they real or not?
Yeah,
Could
I
we
mean,
trust the photograph, right? So here we are almost 100 years later, or maybe just over 100 years later, and we're having a similar kind of debate about a different Gutenberg technology at a different moment in time. So we kind of like need to understand the historical kind of like examples that we've got where we can learn around how these new technologies are quite rightly critically assessed and analyzed.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about two different moments in time. I mean, late 19th century, you know, if a photograph was faked, it would concern a small pool of people. Now with the digital technology and the scale and speed of it, as Ashley was saying, somebody puts out a video of a politician, or Mr. President was saying, you know, a politician taking a bribe, that goes completely viral.
Absolutely.
The guy's or woman's career is completely finished, and meanwhile, that was a fake, and how are you going to prove that it's a fake? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, we are in an era when, as Ashley said, you know, I mean, the genie is out of the bottle, and, you know, what can we do to stop this? You used to run a country. Tell us how we could stop something like this.
Well, I mean, I think we can adopt at least some minimal standards, such as that if this is not, a deepfake is not time-stamped, which is an easy technology. I mean, if you can time-stamp it, or, I mean, if you accept it only if it has been time-stamped, all right. I mean, that's not going to remove the virality, but it can, at least in terms of sort of successive, I mean, legal action following from it, you can say this has been faked, which is more believable than saying, no, I didn't take that bribe, which is, you know, what you are going to be facing when if there is a viral, I mean, if a fake video has gone viral. I mean, I see, on the artistic side, I see that this is great for movies, because you already have CGI, and if you're going to start doing biopics, you don't have to, or if you're going to do a movie about, any politician or any historical figure, at least when it comes to those.
Like documentaries, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can just have, you just create that person, and you don't have to find an actor that looks like Richard Nixon. You have Richard Nixon, and you have his voice, and you have his intonation, and you have his face, and so you can actually make it very real. As entertainment, this is great, but when it comes to actually living people who are involved in policy making, I mean, that's one side. Take another example, which is, in terms of military action. I mean, you get if you're a battlefield commander, and you get a deepfake order saying, okay, now pull back or surrender or something. I mean, how do you know, right? I mean, this cuts across all kinds
or a
of...
deepfake video instructing people, the Joint Chiefs of Staff or people in the American military to drop a bomb.
Right.
I mean, the American military, as we know, were extremely concerned about Donald Trump giving an instruction to drop the bomb. They were trying to stop that, right?
Or alternatively, atrocities. You can
Yeah.
imagine a deepfake video of U.S. troops committing some unspeakable atrocity, which has a very receptive audience in many places in the world and could actually cause all kinds of other problems. I see probably if there's one place where we're going to start seeing that cropping up is precisely there, where it'll be sort of accusing governments or armies of very bad things that then they have to say, no, that did not happen.
Right. And I think that Ashley and I, again, were speaking earlier, there is legislation that the state of California, for instance, has taken. Can you speak to us about that?
Yeah.
To stop these fake porn videos?
Yeah, so there exists some deepfake law right now. So in California, you have two laws in place right now. One that prevents the use of deepfakes for a political campaign, to influence a political campaign. And then the other prevents anyone from using sexually explicit deepfakes against someone without their own consent. And so, and that's sprouting up across like a number of states, a number of countries are introducing initial law. And I think universally we'll probably see similar. But to me, I think law is a great sign. Like law tends to be a great guide of like putting guardrails in place around what's harmful and what's not. And I think the fact that we do have legal regulation around deepfakes, like it's proof that there are real consequences. Like,
and so, do you think the law is a good method, of controlling this?
I think it's one of them. I think it has to be a technical solution. There has to be a regulated solution. And then there just surely has to be education. Like scams are not new. Like we all have like a built-in BS meter, and we have to like be able to distinguish between what's real and what's not. And I think this is one of those things where we'll have to like all do our part. But I think.
So what are the three ways you said there's law, technology?
Yeah, so I think there has to be a technical solution. So this is like built-in verification systems, right? So like think about a sandbox where nothing is released online until it's vetted. Like that would be a great tool. It doesn't exist, but I know companies are trying to work on it.
Right.
The other one is education, right? Like we just have to, it would be great to have a universal education system where and I've actually seen some games that exist that teach you how to spot a deep fake, the mouths are moving a little weird, there's a lot of blinking happening. So there's small, things you can start to realize. And then legislation. I do think legislation has to be in place. Like if there are no consequences.
Even those technical things. I mean, the blinking will disappear in 2 years.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
That's not, well, I mean, the problem comes, I think that you can deal with it domestically. But when you see this as a tool in interstate relations, that's where it gets really tough. I mean, I do know. In the case of Georgia, the Russian government attempted numerous fake videos of the president, Mikhail Saakashvili, having all kinds of odd sexual relations.
Right.
And of course, this was in the era before deep fakes. But this was done. I mean, it didn't work because it wasn't high enough quality.
Okay.
But today, the quality is there.
High quality,
So in terms of, again, I mean, be it warfare, interstate, I mean, If a hostile state wants to discredit a government it doesn't like, well, now it has
Yeah.
the means to do it.
I mean,
Let me ask you something, Barnaby.
Can I just riff off what
Yeah,
Toomas
sure,
was saying
sure.
there? So absolutely, there's always the possibility, right? But if, again, we just zoom out and we look at like what's happened in the last 18 months when these technologies rose to global prominence and achieved global discourse, what are the use case scenarios that we see culturally, politically today with this type of synthetic media technology? Can we name one piece of synthetic media that was released during an election that influenced public opinion during that time? I think it's very hard to do that, right?
Well,
So
I don't know that Nancy Pelosi video that was tweeted by
yeah,
Donald Trump.
She's definitely a political figure, but it's not an election, right? So we do
Well,
need to caveat.
he could have done it. He could have done it
with.
with Joe Biden. I
He
mean,
could, right? And it's a hypothetical. And I know we're here to discuss the hypotheticals, but we also need to look at the objective evidence base as well, right? Because we are concerned with objective truth. And I
Okay.
think that, we also need to be wary. I've called these technologies Gutenberg technology before, as I mentioned. I'm not sure if I should be calling them that, right? Because the way in which they're being used culturally, is definitely not in a military or a political context. It's about image-based violence against women, 90-something%, right? And then there's a few cultural practitioners like myself in the contemporary art world, or there's other cultural practitioners in a comedy entertainment space that are applying them, again, in a cultural setting. So I do think we need to caveat our discussions around what's the real-world evidence right now.
Yeah.
And yes, it's good to do threat analysis and threat modeling and plan for these things and if need be legislate, absolutely. But we've got the form on one hand, which is synthetic media, and then we've got the delivery or distribution systems, which are the social media platforms, right? And those surfaces. So, there's a tension there between whether it's the form or whether it's the delivery device or surface that it appears on as well, right? Because that's
Well, we
what
don't have a
chooses
great
to
track
display.
record on the delivery if you look at the refusal of Facebook to take down anti-vax
Absolutely.
propaganda. I mean, you don't require a very sort of high IQ to realize that ivermectin is not going to, a horse dewormer is not going to cure COVID. They refuse to take that down. I mean, this is what is...
Right. So we have to look
no,
at
I
that,
mean,
right?
exactly. I agree in the sense that, and by the way, in about 40 seconds, we're going to open it up to questions. I have some questions, iPad, but if there are questions in the room. But what I was going to say is that so far, as you say, these synthetic videos have not played a role in elections and determinants. But as the technology is improving, as you say, somebody can basically reconstruct Richard Nixon and make it look like it is Richard Nixon in a documentary, then you can start doing it with real politicians. And unfortunately, on Facebook and on social media, there is this propensity to believe theories and conspiracy theories and believe untruths.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so when you're already prone to believe untruths and then these videos come on,
We had, if you recall, 50 years ago,
Yeah.
there were people claiming that the moon landing was fake.
Still are today, I think, Toomas, unfortunately.
What?
There still are today,
Well,
unfortunately.
but my point is that before you could say, well, it's kind of hard,
Yeah.
is it really? But whereas now you could say, obviously, right?
Yeah. We have a question coming in from the student delegates of the Global Liberal Arts Alliance that came in earlier. I was going to ask this to you, President Ilves. Is it appropriate for deepfakes to be used by governments, NGOs, or corporations to do good? I mean, there are ways in which this technology could be used positively.
Maybe, I don't know. I have to, if we deal with security policy, you only think of negative scenarios, right? What could go wrong and what could go right? That never crops up. That's kind of sort of Pollyanna-ish.
Right. When I was researching this, I read somewhere that, for instance, there are ways in which deepfakes or fake videos can be useful. If you've shot a movie and the actors are all gone and an actor messed up a line or two, you can deepfake the actor. And if someone's lost their voice in a video, the voice can be reconstructed, etc. So there are ways in which, this can be useful in day-to-day life. Ashley, can you think of sort of more positive uses of it?
Absolutely. So I was thinking of that in marketing. There's a lot of great marketing campaigns which are...
How so?
So basically, the idea, a lot of them use fictional or deceased character or individuals with consent from the estate. And it's a great marketing. This is, to me, it falls on the side of creative expression, and it can be a great marketing tool. The other example I heard is basically someone fixing a talk, like, you know, when your body movements don't quite fit what you're saying, and it basically just like synergizes the two. So I think there are great uses for it that exist, and of course, like in Hollywood, this is an age-old thing, right? Like fixing and inserting and taking out imagery and faces. This is kind of a common practice.
For example, taking 10 pounds off my weight for this when it gets...
Precisely. I would love that from you too, if we do that.
There are definitely cultural and economic cases, right, for all technologies that emerge, right? You know, it's just this literacy level and awareness that we need to embody and imbibe, really. But yeah, I agree, there are definitely cultural cases for it. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how this technology over the next 3 to 5 years kind of like emerges and kind of settles down a little bit within its place culturally, you know?
But I think we will end up in a situation, no matter what, where we become more suspicious than we were up till recently about visual evidence. I think that's going to change our sort of our reaction has always been that if you see it, it's real, and I think we will have to we will shift that kind of immediate reaction and go, okay, that looks real, but it looks bad. Maybe it's not really true.
I understand totally, but there is an argument, especially in art history, right? And you'll know this well, Farah, the treachery of images, right?
Yeah,
the surrealist painter Ren Magritte, and the famous painting of the pipe, which is about the representation of objective truth, and to question the images that we're kind of like presented with. And I feel that that's a long story, right, that we're still grappling with, really, in relation to human culture and how we kind of like imbibe power in images, right? And what we believe as objective truth, when really that's so hard to find generally, because truth is a multitude, as you know, it's subjectivity, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very hard thing to do, and I think that maybe the deepfake encapsulates some of these fears and mistrusts that we have around truth today, and the way that kind of like powerful technologies can influence us in ways we're not maybe aware, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just still deeply worrying and much more worrying than Photoshop. I mean, you know, we can all use Photoshop to have smaller noses and, and prettier faces and nicer hair and lose 10 kilos or whatever, but the whole fact that it's moving.
It's a multi-sensory experience, right?
Multi-sensory, and also video just has the most powerful impact. Like, I'm a journalist. Okay, I'm a print journalist. I write a story. Sometimes there are images that I take, somebody else takes. But I always know that when there's a little video clip, you know, it has the most important impact on audiences, and therefore that's why this worries me.
Yeah.
You know, Ashley, do you think that, you know, it would make sense for federal government to intervene in the United States, for governments to legislate around this, and to put, you know, barriers in?
Yeah, I think it has to be a DC and tech thing.
It has to be a Washington, D.C. led thing.
Yeah, I think it has to. I don't know if like regulation is the full answer.
Sorry?
I don't know if regulation itself is like the answer, the absolute like federal law against. I don't know if we understand the capability of the technology enough to put in a law that is all encompassing.
Yeah.
So far, it's generally failed when it comes to tech because you cannot foresee. I mean, look at GDPR is a big step forward, yes, but it actually kind of screws up in a lot of areas.
Exactly.
I think that what also needs to be brought in, at least for things in domestic cases, is liability. I mean, trash Article 230, because when it comes to deep fakes, the platforms have to be afraid of liability when it comes to deep fakes. And I mean, if you're already refusing to take down what is obviously wrong and conspiracy mongering, when you get to deep fakes, I mean, I can see Facebook saying, well, we don't really know. We'll just keep it up because it really drives interactions, right? So,
yeah,
absolutely.
We have basically less than, 30 seconds. I only have a minute left. Mr. President, I was going to turn to you and say, because this is a conference about democracy, In a few words, can you tell us how concerning deepfakes are to democracy?
As a means of undermining democracy, and as we have seen in the past 10 years, serious attempts to undermine democracy, and by which I mean both civil liberties or human rights, as well as elections, that anything that the adversaries of liberal democracy can use, they will use. I mean, you have this, we just saw, I mean, an election 2 weeks ago in Russia, which is a pseudo-democracy. I mean, and there's nothing you can do that, we cannot get them with whatever, deepfakes or any other, manipulations, because they've already decided what the results are. But they can do that to us. And as we've seen from ever since, I'd say, the Ukraine war, when this became a big thing in the West, is that you can lie and people will believe you. And this is, that is a huge change. I mean, we had it earlier already, but this was kind of launched against, against Ukraine in the West, and people bought this stuff.
Yes, I mean, I think that's really the sinister thought that we should leave with. People lie and they can be believed. So thank you so much to my excellent panelists. It was a wonderful session, and thank you for being with us, audiences everywhere.